let's talk now on the Gen Z where, you've got a young generation.
Yeah.
How can they go about it?
Yeah. So, I mean, on this issue of one thing I want to mention, and this is, I think, very much linked to the Gen Z experience, and it is here it is. It's that the and I'm borrowing from my colleague Vivian Ming, who is runs a consultancy, an educational consultancy in Silicon Valley called Sokos, and she's a neuroscientist. She's amazing. I've had her. I've written a couple of articles with her, which you can find on my website. But she talks about this phenomenon of um, sort of the startup world in the Silicon Valley, where you get the odd CEO that she has come across who is aware of the fact that people coming into the workplace are looking for meaning. They're looking for this kind of purposeful existence. And the CEO founder says, sort of invents a purpose, kind of finds something that makes sense, right? But doesn't really lead from that. You could argue if I'm really cynical, I'd say they were just doing it as a smokescreen, right? And her point is, this is actually worse than doing nothing, right? Because purpose is fundamentally, we are wired for purpose as human beings, right? We're wired for asking why. We're wired for greater connection, greater meaning, right? And this is, part of our brains, part of the latter stages of human brain development got two things. One is the need to ask why, to think long term, and two, um, empathy. And both of those can be easily disrupted. But as it turns out, we are sort of wired for it. When you start to say, "Hey, come join me because I'm a purposeful company," but deep down you're really saying, "Hey, come join me. I'm hoping to be a billionaire out of this," you got a problem. And the real problem is that any smart young individual coming into that business is going to smell that very quickly, right? We're not, we as I always say, we as human beings, we're not, our ancestors were not the ones who came out of the cave and said, "Wow, the sun's up. I'm so optimistic. You know, let me go see if this big cat will play with me." Right? We weren't our ancestors, the ones who survived, the ones who made it into the gene pool, were the ones who were suspicious, who were frightened, all this kind of on edge, and said, "I hope that tribe over there in that other valley, I'm scared. I don't trust them because they might kill me." Right? So we're good at picking out things that are not authentic. And by the way, as a sidebar, this is one of the reasons why I spend so much time in leadership development talking about authenticity. It's a concept I struggled with a lot, and then when we did the work on purpose, it became very clear what it was to me anyway. And authenticity is something similar. We can smell, we know when a leader is authentic or not authentic, and similarly, we know whether the purpose is going to hold up or not hold up, right? So I would say first and foremost, understand that Gen Z is just like everyone else in the sense that they're going to smell it very quickly. So don't go into a purpose exercise thinking you're going to make good window dressing that they're going to accept. It's not going to work, and it'll probably make matters worse. Now, the challenge of an individual person coming into the business seeking out their purpose is complex. It's a complex process because we go in with a concept of what we want, what meaning we want, what contribution we want to make, what kind of values we have, and what kind of organization we want to be aligned with. And we sort of do our best to kind of target those companies and then join them. We also need to earn a salary, right? We try to target those companies and join them, and then we find out that things are kind of uneven and they're not exactly what we thought they were, and it could be a real challenge. I mean, my whole there when I look at my career, right, I can see a through line. I can see the consistency, but at the time, I would not have said, "Gee, I really should be in leadership development and consulting and organizational change." Like, no, there's nothing that would have said when I was 27, 26, 25 that that's what I should be doing. But when I look back, I see how things were connected to other things. And so that's the journey of trying to unfold your purpose in the context of work. When we got into by the way, the topic of individual purpose is a topic that my co-author and I, we talked about it and we said, please, let's not write about that. There's too much. It's sort of guru land. It's sort of self-help land. It's sort of not where we were going. We were going more strategic, enterprise purpose. But we decided to write the book at a program with a large pharmaceutical company. And what's interesting about that experience was that we were, we were working with the sort of upper middle of the organization, sort of director, senior director level, even executive director level. And as as and they were the ones who gave the feedback to the C-suite that we need to be more explicit about purpose. So, the other lesson here is don't underestimate the power of a groundswell
Mm.
around purpose and meaning, right? And no leader, no senior leader should do that. But let's get back to the individual journey because the individual journey is complex.
Yeah.
We what caused us to actually want to write about it was a gentleman by the name of Daniel Pink. Most people listening to this probably know him. Great author, is just a master at accessing relatively arcane organizational science literature, psychology literature, and applying it to the business context, the business reader, right? And making it relevant. And I got to meet him at one of the conferences that you and I would have attended together, and in South Africa, and he was speaking for us. And I told him, I said, Daniel, I'm really pleased to meet you. I've been working with your book and your concepts around the book Drive that came out in I think 2011, 2010, and he said something really surprising to me. He said, we were not that satisfied with the way that chapter on purpose, individual purpose came out. And he said, but I can share with you some of our data and maybe you should write about it. I said, incredibly generous, right? So I got on a call with him and I learned something really, really interesting. There's this phenomenon he developed that we wrote about called, with his permission, called small p purpose,
Mhm.
as opposed to capital P purpose, big P.
Yeah.
He found examples over and over in his interviews of people who were in organizations who did not necessarily do anything that was aligned with their life purpose. An example that I remember was he met this is kind of an example that he saw again and again, but this one I remember. It was a gentleman he interviewed who was very motivated in his job. So he looked at all the people who were motivated and said, how aligned are their purposes with the organization. This guy's very motivated, but was not terribly aligned really with the purpose of the company.
Mm.
He got a very deep sense of personal life purpose. He was very interested in, life saving lives. He was very motivated by some of the things that the Gates Foundation's doing, very motivated by the work that a lot of, successful celebrities are doing in places like Africa, to make the world a better place, save lives, all that kind of stuff. He's very motivated by that. Save the children, the whole thing. And he's very motivated in his job. But his job was uh, accounts receivable in a chemical company.
You're right. Yeah.
Right? So, so he was curious, what's this misalignment between,
Yeah.
uh, my motivation in this job and my kinda life purpose? He dug into it a little bit more, and what he uncovered was something I think really, really interesting. What he uncovered was that these individuals who are motivated, they knew what their contribution was in that context right here, right now. It wasn't worrying them that they were sort of misaligned with this life purpose, but it would have worried them if they didn't feel that they could help others, for example, uh, create a better cash flow so that his colleagues can be successful and get the product out the door, for example, right? Now, this gets us to this notion that small p purpose is fundamentally about contribution. So my first recommendation to people who might be suffering a purpose crisis, right, is to think about it in terms of your contribution in the here and now. There's some very interesting psychological studies that were done around 2001. Schwartz is the researcher, I think, who did a very basically demonstrated cross-culturally, this is a very robust concept across cultures, which means it's a deeply human one, right?
Sure. Mhm.
Uh, and that is that we are, generally speaking, humans are motivated when you really strip things down to the ability to having the opportunity to help others, right? That's kind of a universal motivator for us. Now, the nuance here is helping others is kind of the broad, and by the way, it stands to reason when you think about it, right? World religions are based on this concept,
Sure.
right? But when you think about it, when you really think about what does that mean? What it means is, how do I help someone? And when you say I want to help someone, I want to be in a position of helping someone, you're necessarily bumping into another concept, which is, well, what am I good at? What do I do well? How should I be helping others? Is the next question. And that's what led us to this concept of what he calls small p purpose. My contribution is much more accessible
Yeah.
than this very high bar called I've got to find my life purpose. I talk to leaders who are sort of in their 50s and 60s, and they're still discovering their life purpose. And I think that most people have to get ready for the fact that this is largely a journey. The good news is small p purpose is very accessible right here, right now. And here's my supposition. I have no way of proving this. I think, personally, the best way to get at life purpose, to get at capital P purpose,
Yeah.
is to just do a lot of little mini small p purposes and just see what unfolds, right? Almost take an experimental mindset, but make sure that where you are in the moment is one that's motivating you because it's allowing you to do a couple of things really uniquely well. Demonstrate your competence, contribute meaningfully, and know that your contribution is valued.
Yeah.
And if you can kinda get that going, that's what his research suggests and there's other more rigorous research that sort of proves that,
Yeah.
we're all motivated by, Dechy talked about, in the 1980s that our fundamental motivation is autonomy
Yeah.
and meaningful, not autonomy over everything, but enough autonomy in your
Sure.
job. Mastery is what Daniel Pink called it, but it's really competence. The ability to demonstrate that I'm good at something both to others and to myself and getting better at it. And then purpose or what Dechy called relatedness. And it's this idea, and this is agency theory, but relatedness is essentially the idea that this is meaningful to me because I'm related to, I have a linkage to, I have a meaningful connection to what the company is doing, what my people around me are doing, and how I relate to them. Right.
Okay.
So that this is, if we really get down to these sort of more fundamental concepts and sort of put the purpose word to the side, what we're really looking for is meaningful contribution. And that's probably the best way to uncover, I think, our life purpose. And I would say, it's just way more accessible. It takes a lot of the individual pressure off,
Yeah.
right? And it's actually enjoyable because what you're doing is you're creating conditions as a employee that ensure that you're gonna be motivated to get up in the morning and go to work.